Snoopdogg, who posted on LinkedIn, oh my God, his Notion face, and it was like super viral.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Hack, free thing you can do if you ever need therapy. Because I've been talking to AI whenever I have an issue.
What do you think makes influencer content really work?
A big mistake I see a lot of early brands making when it comes to influencer marketing is
I think community-led growth angle is more about word of mouth, awareness, virality, and building this top of the funnel. But whatever is happening after that is, my dear listeners, your responsibility. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growth Mates in the Company of Women, our new season. And I'm Kate Syuma, hosting conversations with amazing women leaders, founders, mothers, entrepreneurs, and just women who combine all of that. And each time I have an amazing women guest. And today I have Lexie, head of social influencer at Notion, and just an amazing human being who I'm super excited to talk to. And today we will be discussing all things connecting to building communities, working with influencers and making it useful for your company, but also a lot of other things about combining your personal life with work and maintaining your health and well-being. So all the things we both with Lexie are passionate about. And if you enjoyed the previous episodes, please leave us a good review on the platform you're listening to this show or watching it on YouTube. It really supports me to continue building that show for you. And on that note, I'm happy to introduce Lexie. Lexie, welcome to Growth Mate. So happy to have you here today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I don't know so many facts about you, but the facts that I know are already pretty interesting to start from. So you have been at Notion for, I think, the last 3 years. You were head of social and influencer there. I'm also curious to know what are your next career chapters, but apart from your professional description, you have moved from Ohio to San Francisco, right? So you had this interesting transition from a small town to living in a big city. And you also love pop culture, and it's something that I uncovered a lot in your work. And this is what we are going to talk about today as well, how to bring your passions like pop culture into your actual work. Anything I haven't mentioned that you'd like to share with people who are listening to us today?
I mean, you covered a lot of it, but I think like one thing to mention too is I currently work in tech, but I did actually start my journey in the consumer space, which I think gives me a little bit of edge when it comes to tech, because I've worked on like a consumer physical product. So I actually started my journey in startups at a skincare company, which was a great experience. And it's kind of what led me to working at Notion, and then now my new career journey after Notion.
Nice. And maybe just to start from your current state at Notion, I can imagine like working with community and social platforms and influencers in such a big company like Notion is quite huge. It's quite hard. It's quite a lot of interaction with human beings in one-on-one format, but also like with huge audiences. And I'm always curious to know how people like you are maintaining your mental health. How are you keeping up with that pace of interaction? Is there anything that you have started recently to keep on doing what you are doing?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that like to show up your best self at work, you definitely need to make sure that you're, showing up with your best self in your personal life. And so in the past 2 years, I've really been focusing on my personal health and my mental health. I got an Aura ring because, of course, I was influenced by the influencers myself. And I like kind of started on this health journey where I just started working out a lot. I got a personal trainer. Like getting the Aura ring made me realize like all of these crazy things about your body that really do impact your health, your sleep, your mental health, etc. And so in the past 2 years, like I've worked out a lot, personal trainer, I go to Pilates, I go to the gym, I strength train. And because of all of that, I feel like just better about myself. So then I'm able to like really show up in my work day and like be able to bring my best self, and like I'm actually motivated, and it just overall, like by taking care of yourselves, helps your like well-being in all of your life is what I've realized.
If you didn't know, in addition to making this show, I'm also helping other companies grow meaningful products as an advisor and a founder of GrowthMates. And now I'm also launching a new course, User-Centric Product-Led Growth. My whole career, I've been balancing between business goals and user needs. And you know one truth that I found: what is good for user is also good for a business. I collected all the best practices I learned for over 6 years working on product growth at Miro, interviewing more than 20 industry leaders on this podcast, and preparing proven practices that drove real impact. In this 3-week intensive, we are going to turn your real challenge into a growth roadmap, from quick wins to big bets. And I will be there for you to provide my feedback in live sessions. And for dear listeners, I want to share a discount of $100 with the promo code GrowthMates. The link will be in the episode description, and I would appreciate if you can share it with someone who might find it useful. Hope to see you on the course. I also have a quick note from our friendly partner, Amplitude, one of the best tools for turning user behavior into real product insight. I've always been interested in finding faster ways to understand what users actually do, not just what they say. And recently, Amplitude introduced something that really stood out to me: Session Replay. It lets you watch real user sessions right inside your analytics flow. So instead of guessing why people drop off or get stuck, you can see exactly what happened: clicks, scrolls, hesitation, confusion, all in context without switching tools. If you want to get closer to your users and uncover friction in real time, check out Session Replay. The link is in description. Absolutely. And I remember when we had the first chat with you, you've mentioned that you are a fan of like self-service mental health. Like you are trying to create a system for you, like just to support yourself on your own without extra therapist specialists. And I think it can resonate to many people who sometimes just don't have resources for that and just, need to do something with what they have, what they can afford. And thinking about this self-service mental health support, what is your favorite maybe ritual that helps you start the day, end the day, or keep doing the work you are doing?
Yeah, I mean, I always start my day with my coffee. I love coffee. I love like all the different tech you can buy for coffee. Like my husband and I just bought the new Fellow Aiden brewer, which you're able to like schedule the night before. And it just like gets me up in the morning because I'm like, well, if I don't get up, I know my coffee is going to be cold. Because this one doesn't come with a hot plate, which I actually feel is a benefit. Because I think when you have the hot plate on the coffee, you're like more inclined to stay in bed. And so I just have little rituals in the morning that I always follow, like coffee, scrolling on my phone for a bit to see what's going on in the world, getting ready. And then I usually take a car to work and I'm just like, looking at news, listening to my favorite podcasts. And then at night, like I always like to end my night with reading. And actually, like, I don't like to read books about work or in that regard. Like I actually read a lot of like fantasy books because I feel it allows me to disconnect so that my brain can just be totally somewhere else. And so I really appreciate that. And then something new I've been doing, which this is like a very like hack free thing you can do if you ever need therapy and you don't want to like go through the process of like finding a therapist, is I've been talking to AI. Whenever I have an issue, I'll like pull up like I really like Claude because it just feels more human. And fun fact, I'm actually going to Anthropic. I'm leaving Notion at the end of this week and actually joining Anthropic. And it's because I've just had such a great experience with their product. But last night I was like, working through something and I just pulled out my phone and I was like, talk to me like you're my therapist. Here's my issue. And through that was just going back and forth with AI. And was very effective. I was like, okay, I'm gonna like take notes of all these little hacks that the AI bot is giving me on how to like fix this problem in my personal life.
Wow, this is amazing. And some things you've mentioned, I'm doing this as well. Like, I'm also a coffee person. One thing, maybe we can share it in notes, but I have a cup that keeps the temperature of the coffee or any other liquid. It's insane. Like, it's
Yes.
the best gift I have ever had.
Is it
So
the
it's
Ember
always with me.
mug?
Amber,
Yeah, I have the
exactly.
same one. I have the same one. I literally have
That's
the charger right in front of me.
Exactly. That's very useful. It's very handy. However, I'm a bit struggling. I'm also starting the day with socials as well. It's like I just cannot live another way. But there are so many recommendations like you shouldn't do that. You should do something else in the morning, like a little meditation, 5-minute meditation. That's something I'm trying to do instead of like touching my phone immediately. And as for reading at the end of the day, I'm also doing the same thing with a Kindle because I like to take some notes. And I'm now, probably because of the theme of this podcast and this season in the company of women, I'm into some autobiographies even. I'm reading now Becoming by Michelle Obama. And it's super, super interesting because it's like partially about the story of her life and it's not about business at all, but partially you can reflect on the go what's happening in your head and like trying to rebuild that model uh, in context of your current situations. But yeah, this is super nice. Yeah, I'm trying to now shift a little bit into the topic of what you are doing at Notion, what you are doing there, because I think it's super interesting to our listeners to, you know, have a perspective from someone behind the scenes of the product everybody loves and using every day. And one thing you have mentioned, um, your love to pop culture, right?
Hmm.
And can you tell how do you use your love to pop culture in marketing, in your influencers and social work?
Yes. I mean, I think when you think of pop culture and you think of brands using pop culture, a lot of times you default to like a lot of the consumer brands and how they're constantly hopping on the trends, and it definitely makes sense for their brand. So I think when you're working at a tech company, what I've found is, there's some trends that will work and there's some that won't. And how I kind of stay on the pulse is first, I'm just always online. I mean, like you said, like people say don't check social media right when you wake up. I feel like I have to, and I can justify it because it's my job. That's what I tell myself at least. And so I'm just always trying to keep up with like what's the latest. And even when there's like a huge event, like I'm always making sure that I'm watching it, like watching the Super Bowl, watching the Grammys, watching the Oscars. Like award season is like my favorite time of year. And I'm always taking notes of like, okay, this is what we should post, the next day, just based off of what I'm seeing. And so being always online, like I know it's like a cliche thing to say, but it really is, it is the truth when you're working in social and you're working in influencer. And then I follow a lot of really great newsletters too that just do like pop culture roundups, brand tapping into, pop culture. I like this one called Link in Bio. That one's more on like the social side of like if you're running a brand social page. And then the other one I really enjoy, it's called Publish Press, and it's more on the influencer side. And it talks a lot about like influencers, what they're doing, who are the up and coming ones, any of them that are starting a business, which actually for Notion is always really helpful because I'll see, Emma Chamberlain just opened a cafe, right, in LA, and it's her first ever Chamberlain coffee cafe. And like obviously she, used some sort of product with her team to start that. And I think she actually is a Notion user. And so always just trying to keep up with like, yeah, like what people are doing so then it makes it so I can naturally like insert our brand. Someone I really want to work with, who's been like doing really well recently because she hosted the Oscars, is Nikki Glazer. I think she's hilarious and, she's a stand-up comedian at the end of the day. And like, obviously she's having to log these jokes somewhere. So I'm always like, Notion would be the perfect, product for her. And so just like mental notes, it's constant mental notes. And then one thing I like to do with my team is I have a team of 3 at Notion. 2 of them are social media managers. One of them is an influencer marketing manager. And we have a Slack channel called Team Social Space. And we're just constantly posting memes, posting funny things we're seeing. And then we'll just have an entire thread conversation of like, wait, we should do this. Like, okay, what should we do? Someone will start mocking it up, be like, what about this? And then we'll be like, what about this? And so it's just like constant communication. And then I do a sync with the social team every Monday called the social planning sync, where we walk through the calendar for the next 2 weeks. We talk about anything that's going on in the world that we might want to hop on. And then also just the things that we need to get out that, our product launches, product releases. So it's just constant conversation. Like there's not like a science around it, but it's just being online, talking to your team, making sure you're like also, bringing in the right people at your company. Like sometimes it goes outside of your team even. There's just a lot of, moving parts to it, and it's not a science, but it's a lot of fun. And it's just, yeah, I don't know how to fully describe it, but that's
It
kind of,
sounds like it's a lot of fun, especially if you love that, right? So if you follow the content you love and then you try to connect this to your actual work, I think you're just, having the rest at the same time working on something. But I think the topic of working with influencers, especially for B2B corporations and like not just B2C companies, is something new. And I would like to unpack maybe some fundamentals of that. What do you think makes influencer content really work?
Yes, I think what makes influencer content really work is when a brand can actually step back and allow the influencer to take your product and communicate it in their own brand voice. So one mistake I see a lot of times that brands make is they just give an influencer a script and they're like, I want you to say XYZ. You can give them, I call them talking points. A lot of times I'll put together a brief. Notion works really well for this because you're able to communicate it in like a visually aesthetic way of like, here are some talking points that we want to get across, but here, are some suggestions. And here's like how to prompt yourself on how you use the product. But the biggest call out I always put on a brief is please, say this in your own words. Please talk about your experience. Talk about how you use the product. So that's like always my biggest recommendation when working with influencers is you really need to allow them to speak on the product. And sometimes, you might get a draft from an influencer and you're like, okay, wow, they were really truthful with the product. But even then, I think it's okay because it just allows the content to actually be authentic. Because us consumers, influencer marketing has been around for a bit where now I can spot like a scripted ad like in seconds, right? And so I think when you allow the influencers to naturally integrate it in a way that makes sense for them as well, that will allow the content to actually perform well. And one thing I always mention for a brand starting to influencer marketing is just remembering empathy, because like at the end of the day, you're working with real people and they have real feelings themselves. They have things that come up, and so just allowing flexibility in your program is huge because you're going to set a date that you want this content to go live, and 9 out of 10 times, like it's able to go live, but you have to have some flexibility where like if it doesn't because something comes up, you're okay with that because you're working with real people at the end of the day. And these influencers have a lot on their plate. And a lot of times they have multiple people that they're, paying out as well. So just having empathy, I think, is the biggest thing in a program as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we will get back to some also fundamentals because I collected some questions from my community of early stage founders who are trying to understand, like, is it the right time to work with an influencer? Who is the right influencer? So we will get to that point. But before that, I really want to tap into some of the interesting examples I found from your work, from your portfolio on Notion. And we can talk a bit about these cases and share what really worked, what you could do differently, probably looking back. So one of the projects that really stood out for me was your Notion Faces campaign. And I think Notion Faces are everywhere. And I've seen also a small notification like anybody can create a Notion face for the new year inside the product. But first, it's interesting, how did they appear? Because now I see you translate this concept into new features, like your AI has a face right now. And a super fun campaign that I've seen you were leading at Notion was with Snoopdogg, who posted on LinkedIn, oh my God, his Notion face, and it was like super viral. Uh, so tell us more about this campaign and how you blended all of these creative things into something that really works for the business, right?
Yes, yeah, that was a fun one. And so the Notion Faces concept goes back to just Notion as a brand. So we've always tried to make software more approachable, and we ran a whole campaign like back in 2021 where like, the big headline was software is beautiful. And a lot of times you would actually show real people and like real illustrations of people in that content. And so the faces and like Notion illustration style has always been a part of our brand. And then one fun thing about being a Notion employee is we have an in-house illustrator that illustrates all of the things you see like on the outward facing items of the brand. But he will make a portrait for every Notion employee. So like when I joined, I got my own hand-drawn Notion portrait. In our Slack, everyone has their face. And then from there, like a lot of employees will put the face on their Twitter profiles or LinkedIn profiles. So it's always been a part of our brand. And our community has always been asking, like they want their own Notion face. How do they get it? We've even seen community members like making their own and, charging people to like make them theirs. And so we kind of wanted to bring our brand to people in a way where they could make, their own Notion face. And again, goes back to that joy of just like building. And so we always run a huge New Year's campaign because like Notion is the perfect tool to start your year with. But this year we were like, okay, how can we do something different and give back to the community? Which is where we came up with the idea of this Notion face generator. And our creative team, like they killed it. They worked on this. I was just the one promoting it, but it is something that people have been asking for. And one thing we wanted to do, which a lot, I also was posting about this on our social accounts when we launched it. People were like, well, why can't I just put a, picture of my face in and have AI generate me my Notion face? And so one thing we didn't want to do is actually add AI into the tool because we wanted to, again, go back to the play of building. Because, it's a lot like how you make a Notion page, you're building it, you want to like have fun while you're doing it. And we feel too like there's a lot of AI in the world right now. Like we just didn't want to bring it into this product. And so I was tasked with the greatest, thing that every social media person wants to hear, make this go viral. And so my team, we sat down and we were like, okay, how can we do this where not only are we tackling our New Year's messaging, but we're also including Notion faces. So we put together like a plan and a brief of like, okay, not only can you start your new year right with Notion, but you can also start your new year with a new face in Notion, and it will match the aesthetic of your Notion. And you can also like recognize other people on the internet who use Notion by seeing their Notion face. So we did a big influencer push. We worked a lot with LinkedIn influencers because that's kind of the newest platform, I will say, like where influencer marketing is like popping off. Like definitely 3 years ago, you would have never seen a LinkedIn influencer partnership. Now you see a lot of them. And so we did a big LinkedIn push with Notion Faces because we felt like that's where it will stick out when people are changing their profile pictures. And we had the opportunity to work with Snoop Dogg. And we were, as a team, we were kind of back and forth on it for a bit because we're like, okay, celebrity, like, does it make sense? It definitely will stand out. And so we were like, okay, well, we were tasked with like making this go viral. So we feel that because Snoop Dogg is just like so like not random, but just like so it would shock a lot of people, right? And we talked to Snoop Dogg's team and he's actually like really trying to grow his LinkedIn presence and he's trying to be like a top LinkedIn voice. We were like, okay, like we're, a well-known brand on LinkedIn, like let's work something out here. So we had our illustrator actually make a couple like new elements just for Snoop Dogg and for his Notion face. And then we were like, let's just do it. So that we have like anytime I do an influencer partnership, I think of it as like a triangle where you always want some like key opinion leaders at the top that have a lot of the reach. And so I consider like Snoop Dogg to be that person on LinkedIn. But then under that, you have kind of the mid-tier influencers with like really great engagement who get, majority of the reach. And they're kind of your cushion where if like that top person doesn't do as well, you still have the mid-tier people. And then you have your micro. So we approached the LinkedIn partnership with Snoop Dogg in that regard so that we had some cushion where if like the Snoop Dogg thing just flopped because sometimes, influencer partnerships can because the algorithm or something is just off that day. We had all of those people like as backups. So we approached it in that way where we just like had Snoop Dogg go live, and then we had every influencer we were working with on LinkedIn go live the same day. Um, a lot of times I like to spread it out in a way where it's like, a week, but we're like, we want to make a splash. And so let's just do same day because we want everyone to get on LinkedIn that day and see a Notion face. And it worked. Like it was our first time really going with that approach of like just full splash, full flood the platform. And it stood out. And I think it also made the Snoop Dogg partnership do even better than it would have if it was just like Snoop Dogg posting himself one day. And then we waited like 2 days for everyone else to post. But there were multiple elements in that campaign where I think everything kind of came together because we also had like YouTube partnerships going live, Instagram partnerships going live. And then we also did a gifting campaign where we worked with Funny Face Bakery because I was like Notion Faces, Funny Face Bakery, which is this really well-known bakery in New York. I'm like, could not be a more perfect combination for this campaign. And so we worked with them to create Notion Faces cookies and sent that to every single influencer that we worked with so that yeah, and they got it. Like we worked really hard with the vendor to make sure they got it on launch date, which like when you're shipping things across the United States to multiple addresses, like I don't know how we pulled this off. So after they all posted their post that morning, they like, their doorbell rang and then all of a sudden they have Notion Faces cookies and they want to like post even more about it. So gifting campaigns, like a lot of people can look at them as like, oh, this is expensive. But actually when you think of it as like, if you're paying, let's say, $10K to gift all these influencers, like 150 influencers, like, and let's say half of them post about it, the overall reach that you're going to get from that 10K of spend is going to be way more than like the reach if you spent like 10K on just one influencer. So that's why I like to pair gifting a lot of times with big campaigns because you're able to just extend the reach even further.
This is interesting. And from what you've mentioned, you reminded me about one probably principle or something that is in the core culture of Notion is the idea of craft. Like these drawings or like these faces being created by Illustrator is a craft. Bakery campaign and partnership is also about craft. And this is something we discussed a lot with Randy Hunt. There is another episode with head of design at Notion. And I think the whole company has that value somehow, like being close to the craft, being close to end users and treating them as people, as human, and understanding how to communicate to them, not as machines. Like sometimes B2B companies are not talking to users as humans. It's more about super fixed language and like not supernatural. And I think your approach reminds us about like how to communicate to users as humans and how to bring craft into your work and attention to details in your work. And to summarize your advice about influencer campaigns, it's about combination of big names and like medium names and maybe niche names, because I'm surprised that sometimes people are reaching out to me as an influencer on LinkedIn and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm an influencer. I have like a reach of just 13,000 people, but it's about the niche. It's about like relevant people who are listening to Kate, who are listening to Growth Mates, about product-led growth, user experience, and how we can talk to them. So I think that's very nice advice for people who just start doing the influencer marketing for the first time. But another interesting case that I found on your portfolio was connected to events. And I think a lot of companies now are also trying to understand how to do events properly, how to invest into them, how to ensure the ROI, because it's super difficult, it's super expensive. And you worked on the event called Make with Notion, right? And it was a huge user conference, right? With hundreds or even thousands of people. I don't know, based on pictures, we were just a lot of people. And so do you think, looking back, does it make sense to invest into in-person events today? And what companies usually forget to do after them to make sure they make most out of that pretty big investment?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in in-person events because I feel it's what creates like brand affinity and connection with a brand. And a lot of people, they're going to remember that moment. One thing that we did in my early days of Notion is we did the Notion pop-ups. We did this like Notion pop-up in New York, then in San Francisco, then in London, then in Japan. And those were like much smaller scale. They weren't like massive events like Make with Notion, a user conference, but I remember when we did those pop-ups, I had just come from like a largely consumer company where we did events all the time, events, for influencers, launch events, etc. And I remember like some people were skeptical, I think, internally of like the pop-ups and if they would, actually have any ROI. And like I had to be like, guys, no, like once you see the magic of like an in-person event and bringing your users together and like having them have like a tangible piece of your brand, like there's such a like magic with that. Like people will then be users for life. And so that did end up happening at the pop-ups. Like they all went viral. People were just craving that connection with Notion as a brand. So many people were coming up to me, sharing their Notion workspaces. So from there, like we knew people craved that in-person connection with the brand. And our community team a lot of times is doing events all over the world. And so they're hosting hundreds of events a month. And it's because these Notion ambassadors just want to bring other Notion users together. So from there, we're like, okay, clearly there's a want and a need for this. People really enjoy going to these experiences. And who knows, like maybe one of these people is the next CEO of Google or Apple or like, the next Google or Apple. And it's like, they're going to remember that time when they were at a Notion pop-up and they saw the younger generation all waiting in line for a Notion bucket hat for like 2 hours. And they're going to be like, wow, okay, people really like to use this product. I want people to come to work and like the products they use. So that's kind of the like internal thinking we're having with this. But Make with Notion, it's a user conference, and we wanted to basically bring the biggest Notion fans to one place, and we wanted to give them a physical piece of the brand. So we thought a lot about just like the design of the space, the flow. How can we make it feel like you're stepping into a Notion doc? Like we wanted people to feel like at peace. And so there were a lot of conversations we had around what gives people anxiety at a conference? Like what makes people not want to go to a conference? What makes people, you know, like just what makes the experience where people, aren't as happy to like go to a conference than they are to like go to like a friend event. And so we thought a lot about, just the design, the furniture, the experience, the food. Like I remember my biggest thing was every conference I've ever been to doesn't have good food. And like for
Mm.
whatever reason, that's what everyone always remembers. So
And the
we made
queues are like enormous. You can stand
yes,
forever
yes,
under a heat or like sun and like for two
exactly.
hours. I've
Yes.
been in that situation. I will
Yes.
not
So we
mention the conference, but I've been there.
But that's the thing. It's like, you go to a conference and a lot of times people walk away and they're like, oh, like someone's like, oh, how was the conference? And the first thing they're going to say is the food was terrible. The lines were long. Where like we wanted them to walk away and be like, the talk that Ivan did was incredible. Or the talk, like the AI session was like, I learned so much. And so we wanted to make sure those little things like were taken care of. And so lines was actually a huge thing we talked about. And I'm like, was so happy we were so successful. We never had a line at like any station because we just made sure there were multiple activations, made sure there was a lot of seating where people needed to chill and relax. We even had this like dome area where like if you wanted to get away and just like not hear anything or talk to anyone, like there was a space for you. And so we made sure that, the experiences at the conference took out a lot of the anxiety of a conference so that people could actually focus on the content. Um, and so at that conference, we did like 7 feature launches. We basically like waited to launch a couple features because we wanted to launch them all in bulk, like during the keynote. And I would say it was very successful. Like the amount of impressions, because I was doing all the social media that day. And so I was running around doing all the social content, doing live tweets, doing tweets that, were pre-planned of all the launches. And by making a moment, the amount of like reach we got for social listening was the largest like product release we've ever done. And so not only did we have people at the conference experiencing it in person, then we had people watching the live stream experiencing it in their home. And then from there, if you weren't on the live stream or there in person, you were seeing it on social media because not only were we posting it, but everyone was talking about it because people were there in the moment, like hearing it and like seeing our CEO actually like launch the features himself. So anyways, just to boil it all down, like I just think in-person events, like there's a huge magic to it. But the recommendation I would give to anyone wanting to do an event is to think about the small things because then it allows the big things to have more of a lasting impression.
That's a great recommendation. And when I look back at all the content I like reacted, commented from Notion on socials, you know, it feels like it's so easy to engage with that. It's not pushy. It's not too, you know, like me. It's like it's natural. And this is why you like it's very short, it's very concise, it's like very high quality. Every post, every video that you're posting, like at least on LinkedIn that I see, it's like just attention to details. I think it's one reminder I would share with everyone that I'm trying to remind myself every day, like just attention to details and less is more. By the way, the previous episode with Randy was called Notion Method, less, how to do more with less.
I love it.
One of the principles, right? But after listening to your definitely like success story at Notion, a lot of products want to be there someday, but for now they don't have, I don't know, resources to do things like that, but they want to get started from something to build these relationships with influencers, to build this foundation to do these things in the future. And I asked some of my friends from my community of early stage founders, and actually Marie from Tally.so recommended to talk to you. So this is why we're having this conversation today. Hello, Marie. And one of the questions people asked, like what I should ask you, if imagining you're starting something from scratch, like a new product, or the product is just emerging. There is already the product on the market, it's going well, the quality of the product is good. And now it's the time to start working with influencers. So what should they do first to start building these relationships with the right influencers, probably, because there can be some not right decisions made as well.
So one thing I've learned from Notion especially is like the power of community-led growth. So I think when you're first starting a program, and maybe it's an influencer program, like I think I would think a lot about the community aspect first. Because I know a lot of times brands don't have like major budgets in the early days. And so you have to be very scrappy. So I would find those like key people that you already kind of have who are huge fans of the product. And I would just make sure to continue nurturing them and like bringing them along for the ride, because those people can make a huge impact. Like you don't know like who they're talking to every single day, right? And one thing I've noted, like I'll say about influencers is it's just a major amplification of word of mouth. And so a lot of times when we buy products, right, we take recommendations from our friends or our family, or like we heard it from a colleague. And so I think that's the case when it comes to like building community at a company. Like take those super fans, nurture them, and then think about like, okay, how can we scale this? So when you're just starting out too, one thing I'll always say is relationship building is huge. And I learned this when I worked in the consumer space and I worked in skincare. It was one of the most competitive spaces like in the world. I mean, we've all seen skincare products, like there's millions of them. And, you know, there's one that's in 1 week and one that's out the next week. So the biggest thing I learned was like when you can build a relationship with these influencers and they actually feel like they're being heard and listened to and like brought along for the ride. But one thing I've learned is like when you can relationship build with these influencers, it makes a difference because they're going to remember that the most, because a lot of brands are just transactional. Like they're reaching out to them for one-off deals. They're being like, hey, can you talk about my product? And like not even paying them sometimes. And so I'm a big believer that when they know you as a person, they like are going to be more inclined to want to work with your brand. So a lot of times in the early days at companies, all I do is like take them out to lunch, take them out to dinner, have them visit the office, like anything I can do to like make sure they remember me as a person is the biggest key to like building out like, you know, a big influencer program. And this worked in the early days of Curology because a lot of times I had influencers reaching out to me after we had like met up, and they were just like so shocked that I was like a real person, that I was like funny and normal and like a fun person to be around, because they had just had different experiences with other brands. And so they would message me being like, hey, Lexie, like your competitor reached out to me to work on a partnership, but I would actually rather just work with you again. Which, you know, because of the relationship building I did, that it made a difference. Like they literally were willing to work with us again. Maybe it was even for less money than the other brand was offering them. But because I had made a lasting impression as a person, they, remembered that and like reached out to me the moment that like our competitor reached out to them. So that's one
Mm.
thing I'll say is like relationship building. And then the last thing is like going back to the tangible piece of your brand, um, gifting campaigns. Like they sometimes are cliche, and I definitely urge brands to think about them and think about them in a way that's you don't want to just give people more things because these influencers get a lot of things. And so giving them things that they'll actually use and that they can, like it's tangible, it's a piece of your brand. Maybe they even wear it outside and then they become like a walking billboard. Like I'm just a big believer in gifting campaigns, even for tech brands. Like Notion had never done a gifting campaign when I first joined. First thing I did was I think it was a back to school campaign. I was like, we need to give these students a physical piece of our brand because they already love us so much. They might, and they're walking billboards at that point. They're going around campus. So yeah, gifting, relationship building, making the connection, and then giving people a physical piece of your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also collected some, hesitations that early stage founders have about working with influencers. So one of these hesitations was that influencers can drive some sort of immediate or impulse purchase, but how sustainable it can be longer term. So imagining, maybe we can take as an example Notion or another product you worked on. So have you seen this effect of like just one time immediate reaction, but not longer term conversion of these users, not longer term paid conversion of these users as a result of working with influencers?
Mm-hmm. One thing I always make sure of when I'm working with influencers is like they have to have used the product. And you will, as a brand, get people reaching out to you once they see that you do influencer marketing of like, oh my gosh, like would love to work with you. But you can tell right away that they've never actually used our product. They're just like looking at this as more of a transaction.
Mm.
And so the biggest thing when you're vetting influencers is just making sure they're a fan of the product. And if they aren't, that they're willing to go through that journey with you to like understand the product before their content ends up going live. And so I think from an impulse, like you're always going to have some of that with influencer marketing. People, I impulse buy things all the time. And so, and especially from like a tech brand perspective, I'm sure people impulse download apps and then like never go back to them. And so I think, we use influencers to get people over the line as far as getting into the product. And I think from there, like you need to make sure that you have a good product onboarding experience because it doesn't always come down to the influencers to get someone to use something. Like the product needs to be good at the end of the day as well. And so just if you are like, if let's say in the next quarter, you're a company that's wanting to go all in on influencer marketing and you're spending a huge budget, I would make sure like your onboarding experience and your product experience is in a really good place prior to doing that so that when people actually get in the product, they have a reason to stay. So that's like one thing. But then another thing I'll say is influencers are actually a great source of retention for products. I saw this a lot in skincare because, when I would work with someone, they would be continuously using the product, seeing a transformation in their skin. But even for Notion, like people continuously using the product, showing it in their content makes a huge difference. So a lot of times I'll book more long-term partnerships versus one-off. So instead of working with someone, just one time, I'll just in the contract be like, let's do a 3-month deal, one video a month. So then at least then people can see continuous usage of the product
Mm.
and have a reason to like want to go back and like, revisit because they're seeing like, maybe they saw this person's first video of their New Year's habit tracker and they were like, oh, that seems interesting. And they downloaded Notion, but they haven't gone back to it since. Then maybe they see
Mm.
that other video and this person's like, let's say planning their wedding in Notion and they're using this crazy template they found. Then that person might be like, oh, I'm planning my wedding too. Like, actually, let me go back to this like Notion thing and like try it out.
Mm.
So just thinking a lot of like, influencers have their own sort of like customer journey with their viewers. And so just incorporating that when you're thinking of booking influencers and, a lot of times I even look at influencer partnerships as a marketing funnel. Like first partnership's awareness. Second partnership is like discovery. Third partnership is let's say like conversion. Fourth partnership is continued education. Just
Mm.
thinking of it, like thinking of your partnership pipeline as more of a marketing funnel, I think makes a big difference as well.
This is super interesting. And also, I think community-led growth angle is more about word of mouth, awareness, virality, and building this top of the funnel. But
Mm-hmm.
whatever is happening after that is, my dear listeners, your responsibility, how you're creating the product and the product-led growth. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, if they press that button and started using this template, is the template, if the template is poor or the registration process is complex, they will not come back, and it's not the responsibility of the influencer then. So I think this is why at Mira, when I worked there, we were always using these two things in combination, like community-led growth and product-led growth. And I think it's here, like what you've mentioned, is also super relevant. Yeah. And another thing, do you think there is something you should never do if you really want to build strong relationships with influencers and keep your brand reputation high? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think there might be some red flags or things that maybe you have done, maybe mistakes you have done in the past, that now looking back, you see, oh no, never do that.
I think a big mistake I see a lot of early brands making when it comes to influencer marketing is like at that point, they don't have a lot of bandwidth to like manage the influencer partnerships in-house. And I think, you know, that's the case for a lot of brands, and that's totally okay, where they'll end up going the agency route. But because they're going the agency route, like they're not as like integrated into the program itself and like knowing what sort of conversations are going on with these influencers. Like, do
Mm,
they need product help? Do they need demos? Like, there's just a lot that you can't manage when you're outsourcing your influencer marketing. Um, and so I would always urge people, like, have someone on your team that is interested in influencer marketing, take this on as a side project and like run a few tests. And then if those go well, like I would always recommend hiring an in-house person to fully manage the program. Because a lot of times people will default to agencies. The agency doesn't know as much about the brand as someone internally. And then from there, like let's say, the content doesn't perform well because it's just like has no depth to it. It's like a 30-second ad read, right? Where someone's like, try out my brand, like this brand, and it's great, and here's how I use it, and yeah, sign up today. Like you can spot those ad reads like from a mile away, and it's just not authentic. And candidly, I always skip them as well because I'm like, all right, next. Where like the true influencer marketing is like when it's fully ingrained, you can tell the person's passionate about it. You can tell they're excited about the partnership, even because maybe like it's a sponsorship they've been wanting to get for years because it's their favorite brand. So I would always urge people to manage as much of it in-house as you can. And I
mm,
work with agencies too. Like I, sometimes have to bring agencies on because I have extra budget, but a lot of times the agencies I'll go with are the ones that market themselves as like we're an extension of your brand. Um, and so they like I'll give them like briefs. I make sure that they're following that brief to a T. I'm still involved in reviewing the drafts just to make sure as the first couple of drafts are coming through that we're kind of calibrating on like okay, whatever conversations you guys have been having with the influencers, like they're going great because this content is exactly what I would expect. Versus like the first video you get, it's clearly an ad read and you're like, all right, we need to like recalibrate on like how you're approaching this. Just making sure that someone on your team is still like very involved
mm,
in like the script review, the draft review, and then also just communicating in the company once videos are live because it adds a little bit of morale, honestly, in a company. Like when we worked with like Corporate Natalie, for example, it went live and I had so many people internally messaging me being like, my wife just sent me this partnership, or like, I just saw this organically. Like, this is so cool that we're like working with her. Like, she's my favorite influencer. So just like over communicating internally as well, like the influencers you're working with, the results of
mm,
the partnerships, because it will just allow more people to get buy-in on the program. And then from there, it actually like helps lead into like, okay, now we need a full-time headcount for like influencer marketing because it's
mm.
going really well. Yeah.
And I think for those who are building that function, and I know founders who are covering all of that, even like, building the product and working with the community, which is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine like they are thinking about this one person who they can hire to work with the community, to work with influencers, to work with this from the marketing perspective. What would be your advice to think about that first hire? Who should be that person? What qualities or what expertise this person should
Mm-hmm.
have?
In my like early days at Curology, like honestly, my favorite people to hire were interns because they're usually like they're still in school, they're very much on social media. They know like better than I like what's cool and what's in,
Mm,
which I think it's different depending on your brand. Like for a skincare brand, obviously I wanted like a lot of like Gen Z interns to like tell me what was cool. Um, but as far as like the hire, like there's a couple things I look for. It's like you need to be a good communicator because going back to that relationship building, like you need to be okay with getting on the phone. You need to be okay with having conversations. Like a lot of influencers have my phone number, so I'm constantly texting them. So good communication is key. You need to be in tune with pop culture. And, you know, sometimes this is hard to test for, but just like a lot of times what I'll ask in interviews is like, who's your favorite influencer right now? Or like, who do you
mm,
think would be a good influencer for our brand? Just to like make sure that they're like thinking and like we're calibrated correctly and that they have good taste as well, I think is big. Especially if you're a brand that's like wanting to make sure you have like quality over quantity when it comes to influencer marketing. And then the third thing is like someone who's open to change because influencer marketing, it's always changing. There's always something coming up. Sadly, there's like people who end up getting canceled and like you just have to like rework things. And then, of course, there's new platforms and then there's platforms getting banned. And so you need to be okay with like rolling with the punches. Like things are not always going to go your way and you need to be okay with that. Um, I mean, my biggest thing I always say to my team is like, it's not that serious. Like at the end of the day, like it's really not that serious. So it's like when things come up, it's like it's not the end of the world. We're gonna be okay.
On that note, I think we all gonna be okay. I love that. I think that is like the best possible conclusion of the advice of that
Yep.
episode, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're working with like very high stressed like you know environment and also with a huge audience. I think
Yep.
sometimes just a reminder like everything is gonna be all right is
Yes.
something that you need. And Lexi, I think you've shared so many insightful examples and cases and learnings. Uh, to finalize this conversation, I usually love asking about the future and what do you
Mm-hmm.
think is coming, especially as you are focused in this creator economy. And now we have AI, and now who knows, maybe we will have an AI influencer, but we are too far away probably from that, thanks God. So, what do you think is happening in this creator economy and what we should anticipate?
Yeah. I think again, like it's always changing. And so I don't even sometimes like to like make like predictions because I just feel like you just never know. But I will say like AI is, you know, something that we're all gonna need to stay on top of. I have actually seen AI influencers and I've seen that they're making brand deals. And I even saw that like Meta added like AI influencers to the platform that just started like following people and it kind of backfired. But I think AI is actually a great tool for creators if they use it correctly. Like Notion AI, I've seen it just work so well for content creators because you're able to just do more and do a lot of it like quickly. And, you know, a lot of times I don't even have to like hire a manager right away to like manage their deals because they're able to do a lot of it just by using the tools that are out there. And so I think AI is going to play a bigger piece in influencer marketing. And I could see actually a lot of social platforms implementing like a lot of AI tools for creators that will just make the content quality go up, make them able to do more videos. So I don't see the creator economy going anywhere. And then from a partnership perspective, I just think like a lot of brands are going to start getting more niche and niche, like very niche with their partnerships. Cause like a lot of times those niche partnerships are the ones that perform really well. But I don't know. I mean, it's always changing. So I don't like to make too many predictions, but you know, staying on the pulse is definitely key. And so we'll see where we go this year. Who knows?
Absolutely. Nobody knows, and things are changing so fast. However,
Hmm.
with the AI era in our society right now, I see maybe also the impact of influencers is getting a little bit higher
Yep.
because instead of trusting generic search results, you really go in depth and you really search for some proof. And
Hmm.
probably you, I don't know, this probably observation that I have, I started being more in person, more offline as well, talking to people, asking what they think. We cannot measure the impact of influencers who are just spreading the word of mouth because it's not something we can capture and track, but they are also doing that. So for example, when I'm offline, I'm sharing about products I love with everybody who I can. And sometimes these are people who are founders or who are creating their businesses. Like, it's not just like, I think this is something we cannot track, but this is something that probably will become more and more prominent when we are lacking this real human touch and human connection. Who knows? Let's see how it goes. Yeah, but I'm sort of now getting more into like trusted opinions rather than just generic ad search and noise that is getting just more and more of that noise. And I'm just also trying to follow people who I really trust on different socials, and just to make my decision making process more niche and more specific rather than like all the noise from all of these sources.
Yep.
Yeah. So any other last words you'd like to say to people who are listening to us on this topic that we discussed today, working with community, influencers? Any last piece of advice?
I mean, I think my biggest piece of advice is just do it. Like, I think a lot of people at companies sit around and like try and justify things and like, think about all of the things that could possibly go wrong, but like, just do it. Like, I'm a big like executor and testing and learn. And I think influencer marketing, like there's ways it works in every industry. You just have to really think about the end user. So I would just urge everyone to just try it and just see if it works, and stop talking about it and just do it.
Just do it, and also apply all of the learnings and advice we have shared in this episode, like trying to balance this one big name versus like many niche names, and trying to find the right balance there, trying to keep an eye on details, and giving these influencers opportunity to share authentically the experience with the product, not just ads and not just generic stuff.
Yeah.
And also probably it's a reminder for me when I'm working with companies. I just realized I would really love to work more with products which I love, which I use every day. Sometimes for niche people like me, there are products that are coming to me, but I'm actually not an end user, and I will never be an end user.
Yeah.
While I think it's very smart also for influencers who are listening to this show and creators to think about the companies you're partnering with, so to ensure this strong fit, connection, and ability to authentically show the experience that you have with this product. And Notion is definitely one of these products. I'm using it daily, like hundreds of times. And as a tradition, at the end of each episode, I'm asking if there is someone you'd like to see on this show someday. Big name, small name, it doesn't matter. Somebody who is standing behind a great product that you love and use, and you'd like to unpack the story behind the scenes of that product, or something else. So all candidates are open and welcome. Yeah.
I have two. So the first is like probably unrealistic, but like going back to
let's be ambitious. Yeah.
Going back to like last year and the year before, like I just think that Taylor Swift's marketing team, they're just geniuses. Like the way they're able to weave things, the way they're able to drop Easter eggs, the way they're able to keep everyone on the edge of their seat. Like I just really want to know like who is the mastermind, like marketer behind all of that. Cause like the Eras tour was massive. Like the amount of like activations they had outside of it, the friendship bracelets, the way they were able to get massive friendship bracelets on these stadiums. Like it was just so fun as a marketer to watch, just like the little Easter eggs and the things they were doing all throughout the summer when the Eras tour was like the massive, thing that everyone was like looking to. And the fact too that people were like getting on, grainy TikTok lives every night to like see these surprise songs. Like I had so much fun with all of that. And so whoever is behind that, like masterminding this marketing strategy, I would just love to hear from. And then the more realistic person is, I have a really good friend who I met at Notion. His name's Alex Howe, and he ran Notion social media until he ended up leaving, and then like I had to take it over. But I just learned so much from him because he not only is someone who's like on the pulse with culture, but he's able to like ingrain the culture in a way that makes sense for your brand, which I think is a hard balance to strike when you're someone who works in social. Because there's a lot of brands that just, hop on trends and it's kind of cringe, but I think he did an
Mm,
amazing job at Notion, like making sure anything we ever did like stayed true to that brand ethos. And beyond
mm,
Notion, he's actually worked at some like really cool contracting roles, like Partiful, Perplexity.
mm,
There's some others. Like he was just very busy the past couple of months, and he just tells me like I'm always looking to him for advice because he just knows social better than anyone else. And so I think if people in your audience are interested in like how to run social media, because he joined Notion in the early days as well. So
mm.
he knows how to like scale a social media channel from like no followers to like hundreds of thousands to millions of followers. So I think people would get a lot out of his advice.
I'm super curious to reach out and like even myself super curious about building that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you reminded with this example of Taylor Swift, like how you can find inspiration in sources that are super unobvious. So somebody is reading books about social media. Somebody is going to university to study that. Of course, it's super important, but I think the true and working stuff is happening when you get inspiration from sources that are absolutely out of your
Mm-hmm.
zone of like of not of interest. Of course, it's a zone of interest, but it's something else. It's beyond the business zone. And for example, for me to make this season, I found inspiration in a book which is called In the Company of Women, which collects hundreds of stories, and it's a physical book. And I was thinking, all right, I can make it more in a podcast format, but maybe then I will turn it into some digital magazine and maybe physical magazine. So some sort of inspiration is happening absolutely elsewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
just find your source and find the way to follow that truly and authentically. Like, I'm going to exhibitions, and art is my source of inspiration. For you, it's pop culture and following the what is happening in the world. So just for our listeners, just think about what can be your source of inspiration and turn that sparks into something that is good for your business and something you are creating. And on that note, Lexie, thank you so much for being the guest today. And yeah, it's been amazing. I have a lot of notes just for myself to think about me and my future as a potential like influencer who
Mm-hmm.
knows where it leads, but also for companies who are building that strategy. And anybody who listened to that episode and found it useful, please give us a good review on platforms you are following, growth mates. And yeah, that's very, very helpful for me to keep building this show. And so thank you so much, Lexie.
Thank you for having me.